Welcome to Quilting's first reality show, live and unscripted with Susan Smith.
Hello, hello, and welcome. Got my coffee in hand. I am Susan Smith, and you are in my studio, Stitched by Susan. This live and unscripted episode is what fans have come to know and love. I never knew this would be such a hit, but it's so fun to do because basically I'm live streaming the quilting of an entire project. So right from the loading, talking you through some of the decisions as I make them or the ones that I've made, in advance, and then on into the quilting and addressing the challenges that the quilt has or the unique features that it has all the way through. So you get to see a whole quilt in real time, and everything is included. If you've watched before, you know I speak the truth. If there's a thread break, it'll be here. If there's a bobbin issue, it'll be here. And you get to see me decide things and sometimes stumble in my decisions. And also you get to be interactive. So feel free to type in your questions and thoughts as we go. And we'll take some breaks and try to read them. As I get more viewers, it's getting more difficult to do them all, but we will do our very best. You can help us if you will type a capital letter Q in front of your question, because that way we can run a search for the questions. So if there's hundreds of comments, we can find the questions. So that would be very helpful. Meantime, my husband is Mr. Producer, and he's in the chat window too. So some of the things that you ask, there he is. Some of the things that you ask about products, he'll answer as we go. So that's my husband, Dave, Mr. Producer. A huge thanks to him. This is not a one-woman show by any means. So we've got today, have we got 4 cameras going or 5 today?
1, 2, 5.
We have 5 cameras going today. So he's the guy behind all that keeps that all organized. I've been doing, for the month of April, I've been doing little snippets live on my YouTube channel each morning. Well, not always in the morning, but each day. And someone asked the other day, they caught a glimpse of some PVC piping that's around the ceiling in my studio room and said, what on earth is that PVC piping? That is our DIY camera apparatus. So Dave built all that. So kind of in the center of my room, there's this ring of PVC pipe that hangs down, and all the cameras and things are mounted on that. It's very clever and very DIY. So that was kind of fun. So if you haven't caught any of those live episodes, you might want to check in with them. They're very casual. They just have to do with mostly machine quilting topics, but generally what I'm working on that day or a challenge that I'm facing that day. So you can find them on my YouTube channel and look for the playlist Bite-Sized Tips, and that's where they all are. Okay, what else shall we talk about? What the last week has held a little bit. We had family visiting, our daughter and her husband and 2 grandbabies. They just went home actually Sunday afternoon. So we've been recovering for a week. They were so sweet. They have 2 toddlers, 1 and 3. So it was a fun, action-packed week, as you might imagine, when they were here. At the same time, I was also launching my freehand quilting masterclass, which is an online course that students can go through at their own pace, but also I launch it at times, like take an enrollment and then walk through the class with the students. So while the grandbabies were here, I was in the process of teaching the workshops and signing the people up and answering all the emails and so forth. And now this last week was our first week of lessons. So question and answer sessions with the students and getting acquainted. And some of you are here today. So that is so very fun. So the design that I'm going to be quilting today is called an all-over feather, and it's my version. There are other quilters certainly that do all-over type feathers as well. My version is quite casual. It doesn't have a spine in it, so it's quite easy to move around the quilt top. So I don't know that I remembered to do this beforehand, but I will do it after. There will be a link in the show notes below this show to that class. I have a class on it. It's a recording of a workshop, and it is entirely free. You just need to register so that you can log in as a student and go back to it as often as you want. So if you're interested in the design I'm quilting today, that's available to you. I do have a podcast as well. At the moment, it's kind of on hiatus, so there are not a lot of new episodes going out, but there are about 90 past episodes, and it's called Measure Twice, Cut Once, and Other Life Lessons Learned from Quilters. So most of them are interview-based, talking with other quilters and crafters, but a little light listening for you in your sewing room. Okay, a couple more thanks before we dive into the quilting, and then one more sip of coffee, and then we're at it. One of the huge thanks is due to our good friend Dan, who graciously lets us use his guitar music. You'll be hearing that throughout the show today. It's so soothing and relaxing and such good listening. Sadly, it's not available for sale commercially, so you have to come to the show to listen to it. But a great big thanks to him. And then also our son Will, who does the introductions to these episodes. It was the little French introduction, I believe, today. So he does those for me. Thanks to Will for that. And did I thank Mr. Producer? I think I did, but it's worth thanking him again. Yay, Dave. We so appreciate what all he does, and you guys get a little side look at my studio whenever he does the Dave Cam. Okay, I'm going to take one more sip, and we're going to get looking at today's project. All righty. Okay, I've got the... Can you guys hear him in the background? I do have a little, one of those little inexpensive coffee electric heater doodads under my mug. The problem with it is, and it's not a huge problem, the problem with it is when I stand over here talking, right, with my coffee in hand, of course it turns off. So every time I put my mug on it, I have to remember to turn it back on. But we're trying that out today to see how it works. But that's not the project. The project today, I just have to think how best to show you. You're not going to get to see the quilt first because I got to put them on here in order. You're going to get to see the backing first. But the project is a vintage quilt. So I'm lucky enough to live fairly near to Janet Nesbitt of One Sister Designs. Many of you will know her designs, the crazy type. Most of her books have crazy in the title. I can't even think of them off the cuff. But anyway, if you know her, you know what I mean. It's a lot of cutting and matching and just super fun patchwork. That's very Janet. Well, Janet has this quilt that her great-grandmother pieced. And I know these details because she put these lovely labels that are on the backing of the quilt already. But the quilt that we're going to be doing was pieced before her death in 1934. So sometime before 1934, the quilt was pieced. So Janet has taken the time to make, and it's sideways, I know, but whoop, this way, to make these, no, wrong way, to make these great labels with some of the information, with some photos, a newspaper clipping, and some of her handwritten notes, so that people will always know the details about this quilt. So it's going to get quilted right in. It is quite large, as you can see. So I've arranged it to be at my starting edge so that I can see it and know where it's going to fall in the quilt, right? I would not want to get to the end and find that it's 2 inches from one edge and 10 from the other. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I've arranged my backing this way. Luckily, it also means that my seam is running horizontally, but the labels would have taken precedence in my decision making about which way to arrange the backing. So let's go ahead and get that loaded. Do we want a bigger view, hon? So I am using the red snapper system, as always. All right, so Dave is saying that some of you are asking about audio difficulties, but he is checking the stream continually and monitoring it, and it is good here. So he feels pretty confident in saying it's something at your end. I don't know what that might be. Do you have suggestions, Dave, for what they ought to do? Log out and back in, possibly? He is really trying to monitor closely what is going out into the stream from here. So it seems to be good at this end. I'm just grabbing my snappers off camera. I keep them in a, it's kind of a hallway vase type thing that allows them all to stand up in the corner of my room. I do love the snapper system. It's so quick and efficient, and works really well on this quilt because it's important that you have a straight edge for your front to establish it straight. So of course I had a selvage edge. We know that it's straight. So from there, I can just toss the backing over the rail of the long arm, like so, and get Stella out of the way. I'm sewing today on my Bernina Q24, and her name is Stella. And now I'll come around and you'll get a nice view of the back of my head. So the next important thing is to make sure that the backing is straight, that it's not veering to the left or to the right. You'll notice that I did not mark the center of the backing, and I don't feel that I need to. I just need it to be straight. So having a straight beginning edge and then making sure that there are no bias pulls going on lets me know that it's hanging straight over the rail, and that's all that's important to me. From there, I start winding it up. And of course I can't walk around that end because of various wires and things, so you'll see me trotting across camera probably a few times. Okay. So now I am just rolling it on I don't know how that noise is on camera, but what's happening is this going over the leader as it's passing over, it's putting a little bit of tension on all of this. That's what keeps my quilt straight. So that's a good thing. There's a little bit of resistance going on there. And I'm just watching to see that there are no ripples forming as it's coming over that rail. I'm getting a real significant resistance, and I'm trying to figure out why that's happening. Let me just adjust a few things. This process is just a little bit different than it used to be on my Gamel, so I'm still trying out, honestly, different ways. And I have my leader right now wrapped over this top rail so that my quilt is oriented correctly under the dead bar when all is said and done. So it provides that little bit extra resistance, but usually it's quite manageable. Not sure why it was giving me more today. I'm still not sure. Because it's rolling my leader, and it does not usually do that. It usually slides right over. I think that it must be actually the labels catching on there. That's the only thing I can think of that's different in how it's pulling. We've just about got it. I'm just tugging it back into place under there. Perfect. We're golden. So notice that it is still nice and smooth. There's no angled, creases forming, which would indicate to me that it's veering to one side or the other. And now I'm just rolling until the edge of my leader is exposed here, and then I'm going to clip my other snappers on. And I keep an extra magnet just to hold that in place so it doesn't slip off, which can happen when you've got a heavy backing. Sorry about the bangs. And now I'm just putting my red snappers on the second side, which is also a nice straight selvage edge, making my life a whole lot easier. But the truth is, if this edge was not perfectly straight, the excess would just hang off underneath the attachment. So it doesn't really matter. And this really does speed up loading for that reason. So just like that, we are done. There's our quilt loaded up, nice and smooth. Beautiful. I've got a little bit of a sag going on there, and my solution for that is I'm going to roll it one way and then roll it the other a little bit. That will often fix that issue. I know my edges are straight because they're both selvages, right? And so it just means I've gotten a little bit uneven tension in rolling it on with my fiddling with that backing, right? Or with the leader, sorry. That is better. Great. Okay, And now the batting. So I talked with Jana and we decided to go with the Hobbs 80-20, which is, I think it's their heirloom Tuscany. I know it has heirloom in the word, but it's 80% cotton, 20% poly. It's got a little bit of loft to it. Not as much loft as wool, more loft than 100% cotton. And again, because I can see the top stitching where these labels were put on, it's easy for me to know where they're going to fall. And that's why I loaded them at the top edge of the quilt so that I could be in charge of that and know exactly where they were going to be. My batting is still folded in half, so I will unfold. I float my quilt top and my batting, so I purposely keep my floor nice and clean under the long arm so that I can just sweep it under there and know that it's clean and okay. Now I'm going to introduce you to the quilt and tell you about a few more prep steps that I took. Here is the quilt. It is all Hexies. It is all hand sewn. And the layout, let me just get up to the middle. This is the center of it. So this way? Yeah, this way's better. The whole thing starts from the center and is built kind of like a trip around the world. Just surrounding layers of Hexies. So there is a little bit of challenge involved in this quilt in that I laid it out carefully before I started and took measurements at several places on the quilt because I could see that the center was a little bit tight and there was some excess fabric around the edges. So when I got to measuring on the width of the quilt, not the length, but on the width of the quilt, the center is 67 inches and both ends are 69. So that's kind of gives you an idea of what I'm working with. That excess has got to be eased in because I can't stretch the center, right? It'll pop back in. So all around the perimeter, I'm going to be easing in. So when I talk about my quilting design, I chose it with that in mind, or at least as one of the very important factors in mind. In addition, I'm laying it out for ease and efficiency. I'm quilting it lengthwise along my rails, right? So I have fewer passes this way. So what I did, because in the center, I've got this as a visual guide, the line of Hexies, right? So that I can make sure that it's straight. But remember, I've got this excess on the edges and I know that. How do I know how much to pull in when this is what I'm looking at, right? The lines are not straight with my rails. So what I did is I took a yardstick while it was all laid out on my floor, and I took this red line here and continued it out and put a pin on either side. And further down the quilt, I did it again. Are they able to see that? Mr. Producer's moving the camera just a little. This is kind of important if you're doing a quilt like this. I don't know that you can do exactly the same thing, but you can see my thought process of thinking through how am I going to control that extra fabric? How am I going to have a checkpoint for what I need to be straight? So my checkpoint was this visual line of red. I continued out and I put a pin on each end of the quilt, and I did the same thing with the red on the other side of this Hexie. It's way down here, so that I've got some checkpoints for how much excess to be pulling up in those edges. Make sense? Apparently there are some questions about the loading. I will take them. Once I do that, you guys, I'm actually going to talk a little less today than I sometimes do because I need to be thinking as I'm working. So I'll try and take momentary breaks and say what it is I'm thinking about or why I did things, but I have to pay attention. Okay, let's take some questions though.
The one, I wanted to add a camera view because
We're just changing the camera view here. Barb design, shouldn't it be going under the dead bar? It is under the dead bar, Barb. That was, that, I don't think we'll show it. That was the whole point of the fact that my leader wrapped over. I had it under the dead bar and over, so that when I unrolled it, it flopped back, but it is, in fact, under the dead bar. I promise you. Jean, I like your loading system with the quilt top floating, but will the magnets mess up my Qmatic computer system? No. And I think you asked this via an email too. I know lots of people who use the the magnets, and it's not an issue. They're so far from the brains of the computer. It's not a problem at all. Paula, I just bought a Bernina long arm and the dealer told me that bars were not magnetized. My question is, how do you use your magnet bars? The bars are metal, so if I put a magnet on them, they stick. Now, here would be a question. Which frame did you buy? Because I've got the Pro frame, so if you bought the Studio frame, for example, I'm not 100% sure about that one. Yeah, if it's aluminum, that may be an issue, but my bars are steel, and they're magnetic for sure. Francis, what kind of iron do you like to use and why? Oh gosh, Francis, that might be a conversation for a morning chat. I'll jot that one down. I don't want to get too sidetracked here into other topics, if that's okay. Gaynor, do you ever get nervous quilting something so irreplaceable? My quilting would be shaky from nerves. You know, I can kind of see the point, but I've done quite a lot of these vintage quilts. So the short answer is no. Maybe I'm just, I don't know. Maybe I should be more nervous, but I'm not. Jan, love Janet's designs. Yes, indeed. Don't we all? Janet is so incredibly creative. Clearly it runs in the family, right? Linda, I think Tuscany is cotton wool. Heirloom is cotton poly. Ah, okay. Well, it is the heirloom. It is the cotton poly that I'm using, Linda. Thanks for the clarification. Deb, red snappers. When you don't have a salvage on your backing top, how do you ensure that you're snapping the fabric edge evenly? This is the one thing I'm not sure of. Deb, I try to use my knowledge of fabric. You know, if I'm pulling it too tight, I'm going to start seeing grooves in the fabric. If I'm squishing it in too much, I'm going to start seeing fullness in the fabric after I've gone a foot or two, right? So I use my knowledge of fabric and like looking out at the rest of the fabric just to see, am I getting it on there straight? Am I pulling? Am I pushing? That's how I do it. And I do often have a cut edge. That is a reality. Denise, get your magnet from behind before quilting. Ah, thank you. No, I did take it off, but thank you for the reminder. For a minute there, yes. You guys are very sharp. I appreciate you keeping me on task. Pam, do you know how she is going to bind this? I don't know exactly. I do know that we are going to, I'm going to baste a straight edge and she's going to trim that edge straight, particularly on the sides. You'll see as I'm quilting, the Hexies extend beyond each other. On the top and bottom, there's just a tiny point, but it's going to be trimmed up straight and square. I do know that. Okay, that's it for questions. All right, folks. I've mentioned before, although you're not able to see it on camera today, on my dead bar, which is right here in front of me under this rail, I have taped, permanently double-sided taped, a long armer's measuring tape. So I'm going to make a note of what my left hand measurement is on the edge of the quilt and what it is on the right. And I've already predetermined what size that should be. So this edge, I'm going to squeeze in to match what I know is coming in the middle. Does that make sense? So that I can keep a consistent edge all the way down. So this is why I have to think while I'm quilting, because I have to pay attention to these numbers. I have to do some mental math and know where I'm at. Okay.
Judy is saying you have something on the rail beside the machine.
Someone is telling me that I have something on the rail beside the machine. I'm going and looking. It must be something you're seeing on the table. There's not anything on the rails. But thank you for the heads up. It's always good to double check, isn't it? Okay, I think we're ready to baste. I'm just literally standing here debating if I should put a ruler on for basting these edges, but I don't think it is required. So I am going to use the basting stitch. Yeah, I'm not going to put a ruler on because I don't have my ruler foot on. It would involve changing that. So I'm going to baste. You'll be able to see as we get the close-up camera on, which we will in a moment. you'll be able to see this edge of the quilt and how the hexagons, you know, half of them is overlapping. So you see half of one full of the next, etc. So I'm going to quilt along the inner one for my basting, and then Janet will do the trimming up later. And there's my pin that is my gauge for a straight line that I'll be using soon. Now again, if you were particularly nervous about this quilt, you certainly could take the time to measure it more, double check, measure twice before you quilt once, right? And you could take the time to pin it more in place. I'm fairly confident. I've quilted enough quilts at this point. I am going to put my channel lock on to get a straight line across the top, but I'm pretty confident that I can keep this, the fullness eased in and things like that just by eyeballing it. So I've got it, I've kind of walked along that top edge and distributed it. So that's my first key to myself. And now I've got to work it in as I'm going across. I cannot let it build up in front of my hopper foot. So that's why I'm going very slowly. I've got my channel lock on, so I know it is stitching a straight line. So as I need to, I can move it up or down, but I've already distributed my fullness this way as needed. So I just need to take that fullness up as I work my way across it. Some months ago, maybe even a year or two ago, I did another episode of a double wedding ring vintage that had enormous fabric fullness problems. So if you really want to know some of my great tips for doing that, particularly for basting this edge, it's called Vintage Gems, and it was a two-part episode because it was a large quilt. So I did it over 2 episodes. But in this case, it's not huge. So I'm able to just keep a little tension on what has already been basted, and that just pulls it under the needle a smidge faster than it would otherwise go. And that's proving to be enough. It's easier to pull my quilt down than pull it up, so that's why I had it extra high and I'm having to pull it down multiple times as I work my way across. But that's easier than trying to pull it upwards. I know that from experience. So I'm just taking my time and watching my seam lines, the inner points of these Hexies, so that I make the most of every square inch of this quilt. We don't want to trim off any more than we absolutely have to. Did I mention that this is entirely hand-pieced? If I didn't mention it, it is. It's very nicely hand-pieced, and it's interesting to note that even some of these Hexies, which are, I would say they're 1-inch Hexies, because that's what the measurement of one side is, right? Don't you call that 1-inch Hexies? Some of them, even so, have a seam in them. So clearly, this lady was making them with her scraps, making do, using the fabric she had. Tiny piece of trivia. Janet's great-grandmother's name was Phoebe, and my grandmother's name was Phoebe. It is not all that common of a name, let me tell you. I have a 1/4-inch basting stitch on, if you're wondering about that. Do we have a close-up camera, Mr. Producer, for this side? There we go. So, oops, I'm going to go take my channel lock off. Let me walk around the machine. You'll be able to see along this side these kind of offset Hexies. And I'm just going to baste the straight line, and then Janet's going to do the trimming up later on. So again, I'm just going slow enough to ensure that any excess fabric is going under the needle at the same rate so I don't end up with pleats near the bottom. Here's my pin that I put in for later lining up. And yes, I do baste over pins. I'm going slow enough. I've never broken a pin or needle, knock on wood. Okay, our 3 sides are basted. Woohoo! Let me get a sip, this time of water. I am so incredibly thirsty. And you guys type in any questions if you have them. I'll quickly put my magnetic bars on while I get a drink, and then we'll get to quilting after that. Mm-hmm.
Let's go this side. Okay.
Set my water out of the way so I don't knock it over. Betsy, what foot are you using? I'm using the darning foot. Is it number 9? I think so. I'm not totally genned up on the Bernina numbers. Monica, how did your friend iron the seams on the back? Are the joints between the Hexies very bulky? I will flip it up so you can see. There, I mean, it's neat looking on the back, but they kind of do go every which way. But these are Feedsack era fabrics, and they're not very thick. And the seams are, in all cases, 1/8 of an inch, not a quarter. So they're not very bulky at all. I did consider for a moment putting a spoon foot on in case I needed to skim over anything, but I opted against it for visibility purposes. I've got the smallest foot I could have just for visibility reasons, and there's just nothing that is that bulky, so I think it'll be fine. Gaynor, please tell us about your choice of thread color. Ah, good point, Gaynor. Sure will. Let's see if there's more questions before I come back to that one. Nope, that's it. Okay. Thread color. You're seeing my cones. It is a very pale kind of bird's eye blue. And I could have chosen several things. Like, clearly, it's very busy fabrics and there's lots of colors represented. So I looked at a pale pink, I looked at a pale yellow. And I chose the pale aqua simply because of the color of the backing, which you now cannot see, but you will as the roll starts taking it up. It has this robin's egg blue kind of pale aqua background. So I chose it for that reason. And any of those colors would have looked okay on that too because they're all light. But it seemed like the logical choice to go with the robin's egg blue. It's a very pretty color. Do I have the Isacord number? Let me tell you, it's Isacord brand. And it's their 40 weight, 100% poly thread, and it's 4250 is the color number that I'm using. Yes, okay. So let's get our magnets up. Mr. Producer is saying thank you for the cues. A lot of you are doing that apparently. He appreciates it. Quiltsy Linda, does it look like the fabrics were pre-washed? Asking as I have a vintage that has been. Any issues with new fabrics backing? Do you know, Linda, I did not specifically ask Janet about that. I would say these, oh gosh, it's impossible to tell. It's impossible to tell. Does the backing feel like it's been pre-washed? I can't tell either. I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I am sorry. But I do know with a vintage quilt, I don't think Janet will be bothered by a little bit of shrinkage, even if it's a little uneven shrinkage. She's just going to get that vintage quilt look that much sooner. Blaine, I'm getting ready to do, Elaine, sorry, to do my hand-stitched 1-inch Hexie EPP. I don't know what GFG is. So glad you're doing this for us. You're welcome. What's GFG, Elaine? Tune me in. I don't know that. Karen, you're inspiring me to take out quilt blocks that are in my grandma's trunk. Oh, absolutely. And I thought there aren't very many Fridays left in April for my daily chats. They may run into May because I thought a topic that will probably be tomorrow's session would be the idea of whether it's okay to do an edge-to-edge design on a vintage quilt or whether it's got to have custom quilting. Well, you're going to see my thoughts today because I'm going to do an edge-to-edge. But I am quite passionate about finishing vintage blocks and quilts and using them. So I more often tend to do the edge-to-edge quilting because then I don't feel like they're dress up. And I use them. I use them in my house all the time. So Elaine, grandmother's flower garden. Got it. And I keep calling this that too, but it really isn't because of the layout, right? Like I'm not an expert on vintage quilts by any means. But to me, this layout is more like Trip Around the World, just done with Hexies, not done with postage stamp squares. So let's get started quilting, you guys. And again, I'm probably going to pay attention and quilt for a while, and then we'll talk again when I get to, you know, a good stopping point. How does that sound? I still have not found a good magnet that will hold my scissors on my machine. So they end up just flying around. They're going to get lost on this printed fabric. So you guys remember where I put my scissors, okay? Already I see. I have forgotten to put my side clamps on. You see, I'm busy talking. Good thing I only got one feather done before it dawned on me. While I'm over here, it's a great moment for a sip of coffee, so forgive me while I try not to slurp into the microphone. I'm pretty good at taking silent sips of coffee, I think. Brings whole new meaning to this strong but silent type. So these side clamps, whoopsie. These side clamps are just putting a little bit of tension on the whole thing. And yes, I get asked so often, do you do that after you baste? Yes, I do. Because I prefer to attach the layers while they don't have tension on them. And then when I do put that side tension on, everything's got the same tension, right? Okay, apparently there's a comment I've got to see. Diana, I just vintage quilting a vintage grandmother's fan quilt for a customer, which was very wonky. Vintage quilts, especially the hand-pieced ones, often are very wonky. We could make a book about that. Susan and the very wonky quilt. Diane and the very, very wonky quilt. It'd be a great one. Certainly visibility is going to be a challenge with these busy, busy, busy prints. I don't know that you guys are going to be able to see the quilting really at all today. So it's a good time for you to be working on something in your sewing studio, and whenever you hear me talking, perhaps you want to listen with half an ear in case it's a tip that will be of interest. But you're not going to be able to see much of this quilting, and that's a fact. Who am I kidding? I'm not going to be able to see much of this quilting. I do, however, promise to take some good photographs and post them with some great lighting so that you can, in fact, see the quilting and see the resulting texture. It might take me a day or two to get just the right lighting to do that, but I will for sure do it. I'm going to stop for just a second and talk because I can't do both at the same time. You want to put me on camera for a second, huh? Just because it's easier easier to tell you about it this way. I didn't talk about why I chose the all-over feather quilting design, and I wanted to do that. You can see as I'm quilting that there is some amount, right, of the excess fabric kind of in ripples, even sometimes within the individual pieces, which you may not be able to see, but there's just some that are a little bigger than others, right? And that needs taking in, and I really want to avoid pleats. So I chose this all-over feather design because it's got a lot of curves and they're fairly small. That is ideal for pulling in fabric and taming it. So again, I mentioned an earlier episode that I was working on a vintage quilt, and it's called Vintage Gems. In there, I go into a lot more depth as I'm quilting, talking about how I do that. But the curves pull it in and tame it. So another thing, a tip that I'm using here that you'll see me doing is that I'm quilting with my right hand and I'm using my left hand to literally manipulate the fabric over the nose of my long arm machine. And that helps me too to pull that fabric under the needle and to nudge it and zhuzh it, my favorite word, into where I want it to be so that I get fullness worked into those feathers, but I don't end up with them collecting in a pleat. So that's my goal. Here we go. Generally speaking, if I had my druthers here, I would now be turning my machine into constant or manual mode, where the needle is just going at a fixed rate and it helps me really get into the rhythm of quilting. But I think on today's quilt, I'm going to end up staying in regulated mode the whole time just because I'm really having difficulty seeing. And I just want that responsiveness of being able to adjust my speed, or even, you know, take a tiny pause when I need to say, now where am I again? Have I already quilted there? Am I going over a feather? So it's going to be a little bit slower process than sometimes today, but that's all right. This quilt is totally worth it. Apparently we lost a camera there, so hopefully Mr. Producer can work through that problem while I keep stitching. when I am quilting over seams that have a bit of wonkiness in terms of being pressed this way and that, and you know, that makes them kind of stand up a little bit, I do endeavor to quilt that down as I'm quilting. Now in this one there are so very many seams and intersections, I'm not able to hit them all, but I'm trying to, and also that's another good reason for choosing a design that's fairly fine, such as this one. It helps everything to lay flat, and you'll see when I post the finished pictures, it's going to be amazing how nice and flat this quilt lays. Almost finished the first pass, so great time to type in your questions if you have them. I'm definitely going to take a break. This is close work, so it's important, even physically, for me to take frequent breaks and shake off the concentration a little bit. There we are. My next one I will move up a little bit more, and I will be able to go back and forth with the feathers before I roll, so I won't have to roll quite as often. But this one I had lower down just for that beginning basting and so forth, so I could only fit one across in there. Wow, my computer is really in the way today. There we go. That's about good right there. I am almost ready for the questions. I'm just going to measure my pins. Remember my pins for measurements that I put in here? I'm just going to quickly take a moment with a ruler, which I have to get, to double check that those are well placed. And I can see that my left side is lower down than my right side. So that means on the left, I need to do some more aggressive pulling up. Zhuzhing, as Mr. Producer is reminding me here. Absolutely true. And as I get more to the middle of the quilt, I do have these, you know, the piecing lines that help me a little more in the middle. And then again, when I get to the other side a bit. But I just thought those pins were necessary to give me checkpoints, if you will, pit stops, to kind of gauge how I'm doing with pulling in that excess, because there aren't really straight lines that I can see. Even the bottom of the quilt on the floor here in front of me is not a perfectly straight line. So I'm just trying to create my own visual checkpoints with those pins. Okay, let me get a sip and let's talk. And I will stand well away from the quilt. Christine, I missed the intro. Can you tell us a little bit about the quilt? Yeah, I recommend going back and watching the intro. I did talk a bit about it. Belongs to Janet Nesbitt, was made by her great-grandmother before her death in 1934. So that gives you a little bit of indication as to the time. And oh, the fabrics, they're just wonderful. Dave, can you tell Susan I have my scissors attached to a retractable clip that I slip into the neckline of my top. My scissors are always with me. Do you know, I have a retractable too, Helen. I don't love that because they hang every which way. So I'm thinking about getting one of those magnets that you put on your shirt and then you just, you know, your scissors just clips. I like it to be always the same way. Or when it's on my machine, it's always oriented, ready to grab, right? That's my hesitation with the retractable. Denise, do you start each quilt with the new needle? I don't always, Denise. I don't always. The quilts are various sizes, have varying amount of stitches. I did for this one, and actually I was thinking of that while I was stitching. I should mention, I have an 80 needle. Is it 8016? But it is 80 for sure, which is a fairly fine needle on my machine today, and I did that on purpose because of the fragile, delicate fabrics, right? I don't want to be making 100,000 great big holes in the fabric or great big, you know, push-throughs. So fine needle was a great choice today. Petra, which mode are you in? Manual. No, I'm in regulated mode at this point, Petra. I do love to stitch in manual, but so far anyway, I'm having to pay so much attention to where I'm driving, and even seeing is so difficult. I've chosen to stay in regulated thus far. I may get more comfortable later on in the episode. We'll see. Linda, have you thought of using a command hook stuck onto the side or front of Stella for your scissors? I have. Same thing holds true. They hang then. They're not in a good grabbing position. So I'm still thinking that one through, but keep throwing out ideas. I'm all for it. Cindy, do you go all across the top in feathers and then go diagonal across the quilt? Okay, part 2. Normally you work in diagonal rows for E to E. Today it looks like you're doing straight rows. How come? Great question, ladies. Dave, would you mind grabbing me a tissue? My eye does keep watering. It might have to be batting for a tissue, you guys. I don't know that I have any in my sewing room. Let's talk a minute, though, about the quilting. Generally, when I do E to E, I do recommend kind of working in a diagonal line because it keeps you from getting things lined up like soldiers. In the case of my all-over feathers, though, and again, if you attend my free class, you'll hear me talk more about this. But it's not really motifs. There's not really the risk of them lining up and being in distinct rows. So in this case, I'm doing two things. I am weaving my way kind of like a giant meander is kind of my path. And then I do the same thing back again. So I don't want to go always one direction. That's one thing I want to avoid, hence the back and forth. And then too, the bottom edge of it is quite uneven, and I leave it that way on purpose. I don't want a straight line on the bottom of my row of feathers and then a straight line on the next one. So just this process of making it look like a big meander is solving the same problem. It's doing the same thing. It's keeping it looking organic and natural. So I go one way, and now you're going to see I'm going to quilt the other way on the way back. Hopefully that all makes sense. Elsie, what is diameter of hexie? What is the wide top to bottom that you're quilting the feathers? The hexies, I believe, are 1 inch, because that's the finished length of one side of the hexie, and they call those 1 inch hexies, even though the hexie itself is bigger than one. And sorry, what was the second half of that, Dave? I've missed it already. What is the wide top to bottom that you're quilting the feathers? 14 inch, 16 inch, etc. My pass of feathers was about 8 to 10 inches from top to bottom, I would say. My whole meander filled with feathers. And that is why I can fit 2 in. I have a 24-inch machine, so I can get at least 18 in there of quilting. Becky Cardwell, Dave, question about Susan's ruler holder on the wall. I know she got it from a friend, but did you post a link one time as to where we can find one similar? Oh gosh, do you remember that? Yeah, I have zero clue. I've had it for 10 years. And yeah, it was given to me, so I have zero idea. I'm sorry. And you know, Becky, it's up to you. I don't have a lot of rulers, but I do find I'm starting to outgrow this one and might have to invest in some drawers because it's getting a little jam-packed. But for a long, long time, it served me well. Okay, dabbing at the eye is, for some reason, my one eye is watering, which is very annoying. Okay, let us visually get... Oh, more questions. I'm so sorry. Shannon, are you in BSR 1 or BSR 2? I'm in BSR 1 at the moment. Monica, Elsie Oaks, a 1-inch hexagon has a diameter of 2 inches. There you go. Somebody who knows these things. Wasn't me. Vicky, found an old antique quilt top. It has a block that is hardly there. It's in an area that's very large. Any suggestions on how to fix and quilt? Very threadbare, almost see-through. Again, I'm not a super duper expert on this. I'm not. I know some people have literally put a layer of thin muslin behind the whole thing to stabilize it. I recommend fairly dense quilting only because it will literally hold it together. Like, it's not a lot of needle punctures, but it will also hold it together. I feel like these feathers would be pretty good. But at least it would get used for that much longer, right? Even if it doesn't have a long lifespan. So, Penny, what tips do you have for being able to see what you're quilting? On busy prints, when my thread blends in well, I sometimes get lost. Oh gosh, Peggy, this quilt would be a great example of that. What I do in the worst case scenarios is I turn all the lights off in my room. I turn my machine lights off, I turn my overhead lights off, and I have a floor lamp, a freestanding floor lamp, and I shine it on my quilt from the side and basically quilt by shadow, because you can see the shadow where you're quilting. That's what I do in the most extreme cases. And if I was not on camera, I'd be doing that today. Because you're seeing me, I'm really straining to see where I'm quilting. It's really difficult. So that's where I would go with it. Turning out all the overhead lights. To me, anyway, getting brighter and brighter lights does not fix the issue. Getting lower lights and then shining from the side helps when you have very difficult visibility. Wendy gives a whole new meaning to blind stitching. Yes, yes it does. Linda, Susan will need a good back rub after this. I know a person. So.
I think that's it.
And also the trick is to take frequent breaks. I've had a few people, because I've been doing a lot of filming lately, and I've had a few people say to me, oh gosh, your tension, doesn't your neck hurt? You know, your shoulder tension. And I realize I need to work on my posture, because most of the time I don't have to hunch over like that. I just do. It's just a bad habit. So I need to work on that. But today I am kind of hunched over because I just have to get closer in order to see. I'm very glad my frame is this high, let me tell you, or I would be in really desperate straits. So again, knowing I've got to pull up more fabric, I've got some excess sitting right here, and I am pulling behind my needle what is already stitched to encourage it to go under the needle faster. And I think I'm actually going to take a moment to drop some pins in. That will encourage it even that much more. If you are enjoying this, by the way, I call this a live and unscripted episode. It's literally live streaming of quilting a whole project. Like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. And if you click on the little bell, you get notifications when I do go live. In the past, we have tried to do our lives the first and third Friday of each month. But as I'm doing more traveling and things in 2023, it's getting really hard to schedule that. So currently, we are just going live as often as we can. So important to follow the channel, and also in my newsletter, I try to send out information a couple days in advance of what I'm working on, what the project is, and what some of the topics might be. So signing up for my newsletter is a great option too. And you can do that easily by just going to stitchedbysusan.com. You'll get a little pop-up right away offering you something. And that gets you on my newsletter. Where have I set my scissors? There they are. Phew! So having those pins in there just helped to distribute that fullness evenly, so that when I go to quilt it as well, there won't be any areas that have a whole lot more than other areas. Evenness is key to getting all that fullness in. Few pins down here too. The pins I use, by the way, are very simple corsage pins. I don't think you would have to have corsage pins. You just need sturdier pins than your typical sewing pin. Corsage pins have worked well for me. So because I know that this edge is longer than the middle, I'm taking up excess here too. I'm just not doing it quite as aggressively as I did on the other side. Although there is some wonky unevenness on this side that I didn't have on the other side. So, you know, it's all part and parcel. This is where too I'm glad not to have the spoon foot on, because I'm being very careful of my fingers, but it is nice to be able to get them in close to nudge that fabric wherever I want it to be. So I think this was the right choice of foot. My visibility is really good, and I have really good control of the fabric. Something that I have not mentioned so far today, I do have an option for supporting this channel if you wish to. And it's really simple. You can just go to a little website called buymeacoffee.com, and there you are able to contribute as little as $5. You can do it just once. You can do it in increments of $5. You can opt for a monthly membership if you choose. And everything that comes in from that Buy Me a Coffee fund goes toward our camera and sound equipment. And those of you who were here for my last episode, which I think was the first week of April, we lost our close-up camera, which was a GoPro, and we did actually have to replace that and get a new one. They do wear out. They do. So. Is someone suggesting that, Dave? Oh, someone's asking if I have a Venmo account or a coffee stash for gremlin training. You know, I think we could give training on how to deal with gremlins. I really do. There are days that it just, you know, you're working with mechanical things and you think it should be black and white, and it's just not sometimes. It's inexplicable. So again, you're going to get dizzy as I go over the top. Can we have a bigger view for just a sec, please, Dave? Is that feasible? Yeah, there we go. Okay. I doubt that you can see this, but I'll indicate it with my hand. So this whole central area is beautifully smooth, right? And I've made sure that it's because there's so many bias edges, I can manipulate a little, right? So I've made sure it's got a little bit of tension on it and it's pulled down here smooth. That is leaving me with ripples on this side and ripples on this side. So the point that I wanted to make to you is I take the time. You saw me basting. I was distributing it evenly, right? But also here, I'm making sure that it's not all in one place like that. I would get pleats there. But if I distribute that, and this is literally how I do it, run my fingernails across it until it looks even, that really helps. And if I need to, as I'm quilting, then I need to get what is here quilted in, right? And if it starts pushing ahead of me, then I get more vigorous, and this is how I do it. I sometimes will literally drop pins in here and there so that I know when I get to that pin, I've got to have this quilted in. I can't run up against a pin with the pleat, then I know I'm not taking it in fast enough. Does that make sense? So if just distributing it and then quilting, if I'm able to manage it that way, great. If I have to be more aggressive about it, then I literally drop in pins, and as I come to them, I do remove them. But it's just kind of like the pit stop. It's the checkpoint. When I get to that pin, I've got to have controlled it by then, because there's a new batch of wrinkles coming in. Of course, the pins are crazy hard to see on this fabric, so I'm not going to do that unless I absolutely have to, because I'm terrified I'll miss one. So I will do that if I need to, though. All right, let's find where we left off. Right here. Let's take our basting stitch off. Someone, I think Shannon, was asking if I have BSR 1 or 2 on. I'll just define those quickly for those of you who operate Berninas. They're both stitch regulator, but the BSR 1, when I've got it turned on, it like coasts a little bit. The needle bobs slowly, even when I'm standing still. When I have BSR 2 on, it does not move at all until I move. Either one of those works for today's purposes. But I do happen to have one on right now. I'm going to take a second to put in my yardstick holding my side clamp up. If I can find my yardstick, it's under there somewhere. You'll see my fancy dancy side clip holder here in a minute. Since we're working on vintage, I'll even show you. Where are we? Oh, you can see it there in the little picture-in-picture. You can see it. You can see it. It's a yardstick that was my grandpa's. I don't know how old it is. Probably 100 years. Very close to it. Anyway, these are my little side clamp holders. I just put them under the strap just to hold this clamp up a little bit so I don't bump into it with the long arm nose. Lots of people will use a curtain rod. Anything that's long and straight will do the trick. I'm really using my left hand here to almost stretch the fabric over the nose of the long arm to manipulate it into going under the needle wherever there's excess. I've got to pull it under the needle so it gets in there within each feather swoop. No pleats allowed. This is the trickiest place right here, so I'm just slowing down, taking my time. The great thing about this quilt is if there was a pleat, I don't even think you'd be able to find it. I'll tell you what, these prints are absolutely gorgeous. I can't help when I'm quilting vintage things like this, but just be thinking about, you know, the aprons that were made with these prints, the little boys' shirts, little girls' sundresses. I mean, who knows? Taking a break for the neck for a minute. For those of you who are not familiar with what a manual or constant mode is, I might stitch in that just for a moment so that you can see it. This central area of the quilt is quite nice and smooth. So let's have a peek here what we've got for speed. So manual mode just means that I'm choosing the speed. In the case of a Bernina, I'm choosing the stitches per inch. And when I press on, the needle is going to start going at that rate. And it's entirely up to me then to move smoothly to control the stitch length, because the needle's just going to go. Here we go. Easy peasy. So I've got it set at 1200 stitches per inch for the inquiring minds that I know are here. And this is slower than I would typically do, but I am moving slower than I typically quilt, so that's okay. And what I try to do when I have manual mode on is I've already stitched with regulated mode, so I know what length my stitches ought to be. So now I'm looking at my stitches saying, do I need to go a little faster to keep them that same length? Are they looking longer, or are they looking just the right size? And I can either adjust the speed at which I'm moving, or I can stop and adjust the speed at which my needle is moving. Either way would change that up a bit. And when I was in regulated, I was stitching at 10 stitches per inch. So that's what I'm aiming for now, that same look. Well, this is going pretty smoothly, so I will take a moment while I quilt to tell those of you who may be just tuning in what all this is about. I'm Susan Smith. This is what I call a live and unscripted quilting episode, meaning it is live streamed in real time, no edits. You get to see it exactly as it goes down. This is the kind of thing I wish that I had when I was learning to quilt, you know, to be able to watch over someone's shoulder and see how they really do things. How do you really fill a bobbin? How do you really adjust the tension? So that's what this is all about. Today's particular project is a vintage Hexies quilt. It belongs to Janet Nesbitt of One Sister Designs, and it was hand-pieced sometime before 1934 by her great-grandmother. So Janet has entrusted me with quilting this. I'm quilting an edge-to-edge design. I call it all over feathers. I know that you can't see it, but I will for sure post pictures in the coming day or two as I get some good lighting and I'm able to grab some good photographs of it. It's great in several ways. The feather idea suits the vintage, you know, very traditional quilt, but also these small curving feather plumes do what I need them to do, which is control some of the excess unevenness of fabric that is so often present in a quilt that is hand stitched for one thing and has a lot of bias edges for another. So the center of this quilt was a little more tight and flat. The outer perimeter was a little bit wavy, has a little bit of excess fabric. So that's kind of the focus as I'm working today, is managing that fullness in order to create as much as I can a flat and square quilt when it's finished. I'm stitching with a pale, very pale robin's egg blue thread. It is 100% polyester. It's made by Isocord. I have the same thread top and bottom, and I have a size 80 sewing machine needle, which is quite fine. That fine needle keeps the holes, the punctures, to a minimum on these fragile fabrics. And the quilt, by the way, is in fabulous shape. I have not seen a single hole or seam coming undone, so it has been extremely well cared for all these years. And Janet took the care to make a beautiful actual pair of labels for the back. She's got a couple of family photographs, some of them of the great-grandmother who made the quilt, so a very old photograph. Oh, and there we got a problem, and I stopped right there. Let me finish my sentence and then I'll show you what I'm doing. Janet's labels on the back, and they're already sewn onto the back. They're large because they've got newspaper clippings and photographs, and then her handwritten information as well about the quilt. So I found a hole in the seam, you guys. And what has happened is my hopper foot has gone right in under it and been stitched within an inch of its life. But the great thing on a Bernina is that I can actually pop the foot off, as you see that I've done, and it is stitched into place there. So I am going to turn my light on so that I can see what I'm doing, and I'm going to very, very carefully undo that stitching so that I can get that foot out. Isn't it funny? I was just saying I haven't seen a single hole. And here's one. So this may take a moment because it is fragile fabric. I'm going to be incredibly careful as I get in here, and there's probably 10 stitches or so holding it right in place. I'm sorry, I have to move the machine away. So you guys, you know, visit with each other. Do what you got to do. I got to be able to get at this. Type in your questions if you have them, or comments about this or other topics on the quilt. And I will just work on getting this undone. Basically what I'm doing is trying to get in under the foot and clip the stitches kind of within the batting. I do not want to snip the fabric at all. Of course I don't. I'm just going to bear with me a moment. Sorry about the silence. I'm just going actually for a pair of cheater glasses just to add some magnification to what I'm seeing. helps a whole bunch. Great. Just about got it. I got it out. I got it out. Okay, you guys are going to see another cool fix today. Let's get rid of those glasses now. I've showed this one before, but it is magic. So let's leave the foot off for a moment. Here's the seam. Can we see? Yeah. Here's the seam that's coming undone. Okay. So, and the seam allowances are so tiny. So I'm going to do my best to tuck it under there and fold a crease so that the raw edge is enclosed inside. And I mentioned earlier, all these seams have 1/8 inch seam allowances. So it's tiny. But I want those raw edges to be in. I'm going to pin to help me too. Okay, raw edges are tucked in. Now I want to make sure that I've got enough of it over the blue piece so that Janet will be able to stitch that down later. I'm going to try and take a little more into my fold. There we go. Okay. Now my pin is holding it in place. While the pin is holding it, I'm going to take a piece of trusty blue painter's tape and put it over where that stitching is missing, holding it in place. Then I'm going to quilt it, and then we'll be able to tear that tape off. And that will just, like, how else would I hold it in place, right? You can't put enough pins in it. You can't get your fingers close enough. But blue painter's tape to the rescue. Where's my thread? Well, I just found another thing I love about the Bernina. The fact that I can take that foot off and do that is amazing. I'm peeking under the tape. Where did my stitching end? I'm not worrying too much about my stitches showing because they're just not going to, right? On this busy fabric. So I'm just going to overlap a little bit of what I had previously stitched. Oh, a generous 1/4 inch. I'm going to go ahead and put a lock stitch right there. I realized my bobbin thread was not even pulled up, so hang on a sec while I do that. I only cut the top thread. Okay, bobbin thread is cut. So I'm hanging on to my thread tails. I'm going to do an anchor stitch, which I've got set at 5 right now, and I'm going to do another 5 just to be sure that is secure. And I'm going to go ahead and continue with my feather design. And I have turned my manual mode off so that I'm in real good control here with the regulated stitch. So do you see how my tape just held everything in place? I'm going to, what's the best way to mark that? I need to have this well marked so that Janet sees it when it comes time to stitch it down. So watch this. I can't leave the tape on because I want to quilt over it from the other side, and I don't want to quilt crazy over it or it's going to be hard to undo. So I'm going to get my pin and hand it back to Janet. I will put a safety pin in here with a little fabric flag on it so that she knows where that is and can take the time to hand stitch it down again. But for the moment, I'm lifting that tape off. So that seam is still open under there, but now there's enough fabric, because I taped it in place, there's enough that she can grasp it and get it stitched down. And all that tape comes out just like that. Isn't that clever? Blue painter's tape is just an awesome, awesome tool. Alrighty, we're back in business. It looks pretty good, actually. So I'm getting back into the wobbly bits, so I've left my stitch regulator on now. mentioned before, but I will mention again, if you want more detail and better visibility about how these feathers are helping me to pull in this excess, watch my other vintage episode. It's called Vintage Gems, and it was a 2-part live and unscripted where I was working on a double wedding ring quilt that had incredible excesses of fabric in it. So in that episode, because it was longer, because I spaced it over 2, I talked at more length and showed the ways that I'm manipulating this fabric and how I'm able to pull it all in with this feather quilting. Certainly the choice of a fairly small scale quilting design and one that's very curvy is key to pulling in this excess fabric without creating pleats. If you are enjoying this episode, finding these tips helpful, I would love if you would hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That really helps me to gain visibility among quilters. Share with your friends, all those things. And these live and unscripted episodes, we're really endeavoring to do them twice a month, but we're finding it difficult to schedule the exact days as I'm traveling more in 2023 than I have in the past. So we're just trying to come live as often as we can with our streaming, and I do try and let you know in advance in my newsletter. So you can grab the newsletter as easily as going to my website, stitchedbysusan.com. I've always got something there that I'm offering free, and if you opt in for that free thing, you will get the newsletter. So this week, for example, a notification went out Wednesday with a photograph of this quilt, what I would be working on, and some idea of the topics that I would be covering. So I'm going to pause here just a moment, and I am going to add a drop of oil to my machine. I do not think I thought of doing that this morning, and that is usually part of my morning routine. But it seems to me I'm getting just a little bit of a clinky sound, and Berninas are known for that actually. They let you know when you're thirsty and want a drop of oil. But I'm going to do that quickly, and you'll get to see how easy it is. Thread the needle and run it a few times just to distribute that. And it is such a tiny drop. I have never ever had it drip on my project. It is so incredibly tiny. That's it. Just like that. So now I am at the edge of the quilt on the right at the end of a pass, and I'm going to head back toward the other way. Do we have a bunch of questions, Mr. Producer, sir, or shall I just keep quilting? Let's have a few, and I'm going to get a sip of water. So thirsty. Okay, Savannah, what do you do if you get there and find too much fabric? Do you rip a bit to try to take more up or wing it? I gauge that before I quilt it, Savannah. I've done enough of these, right? I was showing my pins. You know, if I think there's too much excess, that I won't be able to maybe keep up with it all, I drop those pins in there so that I'm sure I don't very often rip. You know, even with this quilt, it's such busy prints. If there was a little pleat in there, it would not be the end of the world. So I probably would not rip it. That's hard on this fabric too, right? I would do my best to assess it before I begin. How much do I have to pull in? Do I need to drop in pins as markers? Those sorts of things so that I get it done. But if I had to take up a pleat, I just would. Depending on the type of where you had to take it, maybe it can be hidden in a seam and you can stitch it down, you know, like it was applique. That might not be that easy with this one. There's different ways to do that. But there are times when pleats can't be avoided. But this one is manageable for sure. My eyes are really in the dark. Barb, how did you attach the measuring tape to the dead bar? Just regular double-sided tape? Yep, just the 3M brand. And I personally, it's so sticky, I couldn't do one long piece, so I just put it on piece at a time. It worked beautifully. Frida, my Q24 is down. It jammed when my ruler jumped up under the needle. Oh no, scared me. Do you have any suggestions to keep this from happening? I'm on a 3-week wait list for service. I do know it's just so critical, Frida, to not have two things happening at once, you know, not be moving the ruler and have the machine on and off, right? You've got to be in that stitching mode with the hopper foot down before the ruler gets close. But accidents can happen. I don't have any magic trick. Just be so aware of your ruler and when your machine is in motion. I'm sorry. Betsy, did you find out what was causing the thread breaking on the last live and unscripted? I didn't fully, Betsy, but as soon as I went onto my more regular size of thread, so in the example you're talking about, I had 80 weight thread top and bottom, and I've used it quite often in the bottom, in the bobbin, but not usually both. So as soon as I went back to my more regular, only 80 in the bottom, or my 40 top and bottom, had no more problems at all. So certainly it was some combination of that thread. Now, whether it's something I could adjust with tension and things like that, I'm not going to say my machine doesn't like it. I'm going to say there's probably more fine tuning I need to do, but it was definitely that combination of thread that was causing the issue. Dolores, would it help to use steam on the areas of fullness? I've used steam myself, not actually touching the fabric. Works for me. Do you know that might, Dolores? I didn't honestly think of that. I do have a Laura steamer, which is a very good blast of steam. I'm honestly so used to managing it with my quilting, that's kind of my first choice. But steam would certainly be an option. It would be. Yep. Starch might be too. Don't know that I want to apply a ton of starch to somebody else's quilt, but it would be an option. Yellow Truck Girl 1, I know you've been asked this before, but the music in the background is lovely. Is there any way to obtain said music? There's not. Thanks to our friend Dan who lets us use it, but it is an unavailable CD at this point. Well, was a CD. We've uploaded it. But. Betsy, as we cannot see the quilting, could you take your plexi and trace a bit of the invisible feather spin? I think the better option, Betsy, because a lot of you know how to do this already, but if you go to my all over feather class, because it would take me whole minutes to set it up and explain to you what I'm doing for my movement. So check out that class. I go through it in detail in there. It is a spineless feather, so I'm not quilting the spine first, right? I'm just doing both sides of it, quilting all of it at once. And I will post pictures, I do promise that, where the lighting is good and you can see the feathers. Okay, we good to go or there's more? Oh, there's more. But wait, Savannah, painter's tape to quilters is equivalent to duct tape. Yes, it is. Painter's tape, I keep finding more uses for it. It's just way fun. Gee, that quilt top is very busy. What tips do you have for staying on track and not losing your place or pattern over such fun chaos? Well, I gave the one tip earlier, but I'll say it again. It has to do with lighting. And for me, I have not found that increasing lighting helps. It seems to just reflect off all the stuff. I don't even find that black lighting helps. In my hard quilts like this one, I tend to turn off all the lights in the room. The overhead lights, my machine lights, all the lights around me, and I just have a floor lamp and I shine it from the side. Some quilters have a side lamp they can attach to their machine, but basically you're quilting by shadow. Colette, tell Dan he needs to cut some CDs or to make it available. I know, I have. Sad face, yes. Silly guy. But you know, you could come just turn one of these episodes on, right? You don't have to watch it. You can just listen to the music. The album just loops and repeats. So there's that. Okay, back to quilting. I have already lock stitched, but I will do it again just to be sure. You don't want pretty stuff coming undone. And make sure my tape is out of the way and my swatch of fabric. It is. We're golden. Yeah, I should be able to do at least one more pass before I need a new bobbin. Look at me. No side clamp. At least I notice before it's all run amok. I believe I did it on the other side already. And I talked about earlier, I'm managing to make 2 passes, if you will, of the feather. I went all the way to the left, or to the right, and now I'm going all the way to the left. If your machine is smaller, that may not work. You may need to advance for each pass. Here's some excess going on. This little black and white fabric, I don't know what it's made of, but my needle taps. Kind of like batik does. Tap, 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 tap with every puncture, but only in that one fabric. So I don't think it's a dull needle. I think it's the fabric. Here, I'm just going really slow. I'm allowing that excess to be taken up, either inside the feather or between any 2 feathers. And it's working. That was the worst of it. Now we're off to the races. I'm going to go in constant... you know, I'm not. I was just going to say, I'm going to go in constant speed again. But then I thought to myself, you know, it's probably better to be safe than sorry, because I may very well run across another seam that's coming undone just a little bit, and I can stop on a dime when I'm in the regulated mode. Oh, and we're out of bobbin thread, and I thought I had one more pass in me, but no. Okay, my scissors on this busy fabric. So I've talked to you guys about this before, but I'll say it again. My machine does have a bobbin monitor, if you will, alert on it. I keep it turned off because it's not a perfect thing, right? It's just you're gauging how many yards you think the bobbin holds, etc. And when it gets to that yardage, it stops. And I prefer to just stitch until my bobbin runs out, undo a couple of inches so that I get back to good tension. In fact, I think I'll undo one more feather. Just because the last 3-4 inches of that bobbin thread did not have proper tension on it, right, as it was running out. So I just undo that last little bit, usually back to a point, which is easy with the feathers. There's lots of points. And then I just start again. That is personal preference. If you prefer to have an alert on, and if you're doing computerized stitching, you know, where you want it to last through a whole pass, it matters a little bit more. But for me, this works beautifully. And again, you can't see a blessed thing that I'm doing. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm just going to the feather point. And I'm just snipping my threads. The great thing at a point is you almost always have a few, you know, it's kind of a built-in lock stitch, right? Because it's when you're pausing at that point, it's doing a couple of stitches no matter what. So that's why I like to go back to a point. It's just one more little reinforcement. For some reason my needle came unthreaded, and for yet another reason I can't seem to thread it. There we go. Thread the needle, and I drop my seam ripper where that ending is, because how will I ever find it, right, on this quilt? So that's just habitual for me, to drop my blue seam ripper wherever my thread splice is going to be. Do we have any questions coming in while I change out a bobbin? You put a new one on to wind? No? I guess give me your opinions, you guys. Did I choose, well, I'm pretty confident in my quilting design. Did I choose the right thread color? Would you have gone with something different? And if so, you know, why? And I'm looking, by the way, while I'm down here, you know, if there's any buildup of lint or anything that I need to be cleaning. But in fact, I'm quilting with 100% poly thread. There's very, very little lint. I will be able to do this whole quilt without worrying about it. I think I am going to take a moment, though, and run my bobbin through the tension gauge. It just makes sense, doesn't it? I used to do that less, and I'm starting to do it more and more just because I think better safe than sorry, right? Beautiful. I'm going to set another bobbin to winding so that I'm ready next time I need to change. This is probably going to be a 4 bobbin quilt. And I'm not sure how we're doing for time. I'm not 100% sure if we will actually finish the whole thing because of the various delays. Yeah, we're 2 hours in already, and I'm, not even a quarter finished the quilt yet. So, but we'll go a little further and we'll decide as we go. And you guys are welcome to chime in. Do you want to just leave the whole thing on and, you know, we can proceed to keep quilting, or do we all want to take lunch breaks or whatever time of day it is at your house? Laura, that is a huge machine compared to your Gamble. The head where the needle is, the view is way different. That must have taken some getting used to. It did, Laura, although that was one of the attractions of this machine, was the fact that it does not have the headlight in front of it that the Gamble had. That was always in the way of cameras. So my close-up camera that I now have on the stitching used to kind of come in from behind, so you guys were seeing it a little bit backwards as though you were standing on the other side of the machine. So I very much like that about it. But in terms of throat space, it's about the same size. This one is actually a wee bit tinier. It's 2 inches shorter. Okay, I dropped the seam ripper. Thank goodness. Oh, more questions. Sorry about that. Barb, after ripping those stitches out, how do you know the bobbin thread on the back is gone too? Did you pull it up? Yes, I pulled the bobbin thread up as I was undoing them. I was putting tension on the top one and pulling it up. Vicki, what's the oldest top you've ever quilted? I don't know for sure, Vicki, because I don't know for sure the ages of them. This one's got to be getting close because the lady who pieced it passed away in 1934. So it was before then. And we don't know how many years before then. Like, what if she was working on it for 10 years? You know, I don't know. I don't know. So I would say this one's right up there. We Quilt Studio. Been practicing your feathers from the video. Still having problems turning. I get confused. That's really just a practice thing. It really, really is. You know, it's kind of about arranging it spatially, and your mind and your muscles just have to get together in that groove. So just keep practicing. You'll get it. I promise. Caitlin, I've never heard of a bobbin tension gauge. Oh, girl. Let me show you. I will just take a second. I promise. I won't spend a bunch of time on it. So mine is by Bernina, but they also come with, and they're exactly the same thing. It's just branded differently. TOWA is what you see more commonly. TOWA. TOWA bobbin gauge. They are not inexpensive, but they are fairly genius. So basically, you set your bobbin in it, you run around a little pulley system, and then it has the meter, which you can kind of see there. And it's numerical, right? So manufacturers will have recommended tensions for the bobbin, and that's kind of where you start, and then you fine-tune at your machine. So for me, it's about 210, and so I can buzz my bobbin through there, set it for 210, and know I have precise tension on it, and also know that it's wound smoothly. If my meter wobbles, that's a bad sign for a bobbin, and that does happen from time to time, and that's just poor winding, and you can't tell that by picking up your bobbin and, you know, and dangling the tension. But they're fairly genius, actually. Not essential, but very, very useful tools. Okay, I am back to quilting. Move my seam ripper. We won't be needing that anymore, will we? So again, I've just overlapped my stitching about a 1/4 inch. My machine is set to do an automatic 5-stitch lock. So I've done that, and I've moved my machine just a little as I was doing it. So those 5 stitches are in less than 1/8 of an inch. And that anchor holds beautifully. So then I just proceed to start stitching. Because this is so busy and I'll forget later and I won't be able to find it, I'm going to stop a minute and just trim my little threads. Get rid of the tails. Good to go. Okay, let's see where I am in terms of my swoop. Got it. Uh-oh. That did not sound good. Let us pause. What was that I said about not needing that seam ripper anymore? So again, I'm undoing a few stitches. The bobbin thread actually broke because when I went to pull it up, there was none there. So this is an interesting wee conversation. I might as well throw it out there. I had trouble on the last quilt I was working on, and this is in some of my little morning chats. It was a quilt that was 100% wool, had no batting in it, so it was a bit unusual, right? But I was having this problem with whenever I put in a new bobbin, I would have these thread breakage issues. And if I unspooled a few yards on the bobbin, that issue would stop. So I have to wonder, like, it doesn't seem to me like my bobbin is over full, but what's happening is it's dropping a loop of thread around the post of my bobbin holder that shouldn't be there. And then of course it catches and breaks. So I'm just going to try to eliminate the problem for this morning by taking a few yards of thread off the bobbin. And on my next bobbin, I'm going to fill it not quite full and see what happens. And if that sort of fixes the issue, I'm going to actually change my bobbin winder settings to wind it a little less full. These are just the things that you get to know about your machine. Different threads wind differently on the bobbins. I've already, since I owned this machine, I have turned down how much thread winds on the bobbin because it was way over winding. It was actually falling off the side of the bobbin on the winder, right? And that just had to do with the type of thread I was using. And so I already have shifted my winder to stop earlier on the sensor, and I may need to do it again. It seems kind of odd because I've been doing hundreds of bobbins this way, but you know, when it keeps happening, then you've got to address it and think, well, I guess that's the problem. Okay, now I have to figure out where I am again. This is slow going, isn't it? And now I'm going to go really slow because I don't want that to happen again. Seems to be okay. Let's cut our thread tails. So this, by the way, is what Live and Unscripted is all about. These things happen to machine quilters all the time. And early on, I thought, and judging by your response, you all agree, that it would be beneficial to see someone working their way through these sorts of problems. A whole lot of machine quilting and quilting at a long arm is about troubleshooting, problem solving, thinking through. So that's what I hope to show on my channel, is kind of the reality of things. And we have another break. Excuse me. I tried so hard not to cough on camera. Okay, this time it is the top thread that broke. So I'm just looking. So here's a lovely thing on the Bernina. I actually do have a presser foot, so I can raise that presser foot, and just like at your sewing machine, it releases all the tension on the thread, so now I can just pull it through. I'm not seeing any issues with the threading, although it did come unthreaded because of that jerk, so I'm quickly rethreading the top. And honestly, thread breaks do sometimes happen, and sometimes there is not a visible reason. My own personal kind of rule of thumb is the first time it happens, I just rethread and keep on going. If the same thing happens a second or a third time, then I really take a pause and try and determine what it is. And you guys have seen me do this before. It's hard when you can't even thread the needle. Okay, never mind the threader. Let's just put it in there. So I was already thinking as I was quilting, this is getting quite long. And so I think when I get to the end of this pass, for sure, I'm going to call a halt. So get in your questions while you can. And if this keeps being problematic, well, we'll see. Where is the edge of that? Let me get my cheater glasses again. My contacts are very good, but they're not quite as good as magnification glasses for seeing the details. I just want to back up again to the point of a feather, so I've got a nice crisp end. Yeah, my bobbin thread did not break. It is still attached, so that's okay. I can unattach it. So I'm just undoing one feather. It's almost impossible to start again on a smooth curve and make it not have a joggle in it. So whenever possible, which is usually, I try to go to a point, which is very easily done on a feather. And can you see, is it showing? Can you see where I'm pulling the bobbin thread up? So I'm pulling on my top thread, and here's my bobbin thread right here, right? So I'm pulling the bobbin thread up with each, that's what I'm pulling with my seam ripper, is the bobbin thread. And And there's where the first sort of fraying part of the thread started. It was right there, which is conveniently right at the point. Okay. So, following my method, we're going to try this one more time. If the top thread breaks again, then we will have to investigate yet further. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it just feels like I've had a lot of episodes lately that are just fraught with difficulties. I'm really listening to my machine as well. If I hear any, odd clanking sounds or bobbin sounds that are not normal, I would certainly stop and investigate too, but it sounds good. But that can be an indicator, right, that something's not flowing smoothly in your thread. Let's stop and cut those tails. Where did they go? Right there. You seem to be up and away, but I am going to make the decision to not follow through all the way to the end of this quilt, because there is certainly an hour, maybe even an hour and a half left yet, and I feel like that's very, very long for an episode. So get your questions in now, or your thoughts or comments, and when I get to the end of this pass, we'll stop and chat again. I think that I've covered all the basics. You've seen me basting on both of the types of edges that we have on this quilt. You've seen me working with the excess. I've talked about how I pre-measured before I loaded the quilt and determined how much excess I need to pull in. So I predetermined the finished measurements of my quilt, and I'm using my measuring tape to gauge that. Also, I dropped in a couple of pins as visual guides for what I needed to line up as I'm advancing it. And if that is not making sense, you should go back and watch the earlier part of the episode where I showed it. These are just cues that I gave myself for taking up the excess fabric that is in this quilt and getting the flattest possible result that I can. And I've mentioned a couple of times too, I have some earlier episodes on YouTube called Vintage Gems. There is a two-part episode where I was working on a vintage double wedding ring that had some serious excess fabric going on. So in that one I spent more time, because it was 2 episodes, talking about the various measures that I took and showing how I manipulate fabric in areas like this where I've got a bunch to pull in, that sort of thing. So if you've got one that needs some real TLC, that might be a great episode to watch. You can see all this extra here, but really by manipulating how it goes under the needle, I'm able to get that fullness in without actually getting a pleat. The fullness is still there. It's just getting tucked up either inside of or in between the feathers. So I don't know if you can hear the difference in sound right now. I certainly can. It's because I'm quilting over the labels that are on the back. So they have some stabilizers in them. It's obviously an extra layer or 2 or 3 of fabric. So that's the difference. I'm just taking my time. And I think it will all be good in the end. This quilt belongs to Janet Nesbitt of One Sister Designs, and it was hand-pieced by her great-grandmother before her death in 1934. All this information Janet has preserved with some photographs, a photograph of a newspaper clipping, and her own handwritten notes in the label on the back. And I think that is just such a great thing that Janet did that, because now everyone who sees this quilt will be able to know the story of it. That's what I'm quilting over right now, is those labels on the back. There's 2 of them. They're kind of overlapped. It's kind of like reading a little informational article on the back. That's the closest we've come to an actual pleat, but I think we escaped it. Someone asked earlier on if I was nervous about quilting such an irreplaceable quilt. So I've kind of been thinking about that as I'm quilting, and I still say the answer is basically no, not because I don't appreciate how special this is, but I think the way I approach it is such an honor to finish something that was started so many years ago with someone's love and time, and the fact that I'm helping to finish it and help it to go and be loved by family members, that, I don't know, that takes the nervous out of me and just makes me think, what an honor, and I'm so glad the quilt is getting finished. But I certainly do appreciate that Janet entrusted me with it, because it is indeed a treasure in their family. There we are at the edge. All right, I will undo the apparatus. Let me know if you got any questions or thoughts. Do I need to move Stella, Dave, or is she okay there? All right, let me get my water. I am ready. Last pass. Ask your questions. Nancy, we so appreciate it too, Susan and Dave. It makes it so we newbies don't feel like we're the only ones. And guaranteed you're not. I mean, that's the thing of it. Thread breaks, even like I've had today, while not horribly severe, are pretty regular. They happen, and you can't always figure out why. As you saw, the one top thread break, I just went on and it didn't seem to happen again. So it does happen. Yeah. Gee, do you find when you have to stop and start issues like this that you have any residual errors on the back of the quilt once it's all done? No, other than, you know, my little lock stitch does show on the back. So I appreciate that Janet chose a print fabric for the back of this one, because no one will ever see them now. Occasionally I've done quilts that have a solid backing, and there is a little more pressure there to try and get it more perfect. But I don't think there's residual errors on the back. I pull my bobbin thread to the top, you know, beginning and end, so I can always see what's going on. I don't get snarls on the back or anything like that. Denise, I have the TOA digital gauge that gives both bobbin and upper tension, and you have to hold it vertical to thread it through and for the reading. Love it. Interesting. I did not know that. So I only have it for the bobbin because on my Bernina, we have a digital gauge built into the machine. So I have a number reading for my top thread tension too, which I love. Laura, do you do any in-person classes? In this way, Laura, I've mentioned a few times I'm traveling for Bernina this year as an independent contractor, and so I go to their events. So whether it's at trade shows, quilt shows, or in actual dealerships. I do present classes there. They are not necessarily my style of quilting. It's presenting the Bernina machine, but sometimes dealers will add on hiring me to do a class. So that is an option. So if you live near a Bernina dealer and you're interested in something like that, feel free to email me and I can set you up with the process for how you might ask for that, what you could ask for. Two-part question coming up. Okay, I'm ready. Madge, respectfully, I feel like you have more thread breaks than I've ever experienced with my Bernina. I'm wondering if the isocord thread could be the problem. Okay, that was part one. I can go entire quilts without a single break and most frequently use glide, which may have a bit more give. That's an interesting point, Madge. So for starters, I will say I've had a terrible preponderance of thread breaks on shows lately, but it does make you stop and think, doesn't it? Because I do whole quilts without breaks too. But you're absolutely right, Madge. It's a little bit like my process for a break. You know, if it happens once, if it happens twice, if it happens 3 times, if this does keep happening to me, that is a really good consideration, like looking at a different brand of thread. Because, yeah, it shouldn't happen all the time. It does happen. So you're not alone, but it shouldn't be happening all the time. It's true. The Sewing Corner. How's Janet going to finish the edges? I'm currently quilting one of these for my mother, which is 40 years old, and undecided on whether to trim the edges straight. Janet, I believe, is planning on trimming the edges straight. She may round the corners or something like that, but I think as far as the Hexies go, she's planning to trim it straight. Laura, oh, Susan, I had some crazy fullness on a client quilt. I was beside myself, tried all my usual things, and remembered the soup can idea. Wowza, it was magic. I couldn't believe it. Worked beautifully. Thank you. So the soup can idea, I'm pretty sure I talk about that in the vintage quilts episode. It's kind of a way for, if you can't quilt with one hand and manage your fabric with the other, the soup cans or small weights can do that manipulating for you a little bit. So watch that episode and you'll get more details on that. That's it for comments. Savannah, I use glide and sew fine for the most part, though I did just buy some silk thread to try. I'd love to hear about that. I have not been an experimental thread user over the years, and maybe I should try out some more. Yeah, I think it's great that you're trying it. Elaine, what is Buy Me a Coffee info, please? I need to buy a whole coffee pot full. There you go, buymeacoffee.com/stitched by Susan. So I'll throw that out there again with some more information. It's just an easy way that if you wish, you can support this channel and what I do. We use all the funds that come in through that for our various camera, lighting, sound, etc. equipment. So today's GoPro, the close-up camera, it is a GoPro because it deals well with the motion of the machine. That was a new purchase this week to get that camera up and running again. It seems like last time we filmed, Mr. Producer, correct me if I'm wrong, the GoPro had broken down, so we actually had an iPhone on there. And if you go back and watch that one, it's got a terrible vibration in it, and that would not do. So back to the GoPro it went. We just went and got a new one. So we sure do appreciate those of you who support. There are lots of you. So whether it's a single $5 donation or increments of 5, or some of you have opted to become monthly supporters, either way, we appreciate them all, and it has enabled us to make our channel better and better. It's a little embarrassing when you go back a couple years ago and look at the episodes and oh my goodness, we were babes in the woods. But here we are. So that's the end of today. Again, I would love if you would give us a thumbs up and subscribe, pass this information on to your friends and share it if you have friends that you think would benefit and enjoy these episodes as well. Meantime, we'll be back in May. Sign up for my newsletter if you want to know what the project is. I often do not have it decided till a few days in advance, so the newsletter is a great way to find out about it. And so whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, the newsletter will let you know where the links are and what the project is at hand. So thanks so very much for joining us, and we will catch you next time on Live and Unscripted again.